Welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you here today to our Women for Kansas virtual chapter. Glad to be back. It wasn't that long ago that we saw you, which is wonderful. And today we have Micah Kubic, and we'll get to that in a second. But what we'd like to do is just reaffirm what our mission and goals are for Women for Kansas. So if you'll bear with me, actually, we just worked on these and kind of condensed them down so it's easier for everybody to read, really. So the mission for Women for Kansas is to recruit, motivate, and educate women in all Kansans to actively participate in the process of electing moderates to public office who will advocate for moderate policies. And we are nonpartisan. Our goal is to organize at the state level and form chapters to collaborate, discuss, and advocate for enactment of our legislative priorities, which are a fair and progressive tax system that adequately funds public services, a court system free from political influence. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And we're going to have to protect that. Equal rights for all, reproductive rights and bodily autonomy, separation of church and state, advocacy of healthcare as a human right, stronger laws to prevent gun violence, preservation of excellence in public schools and higher education, recognition of and support for the arts as vital to our quality of life, protection of our environment and ecosystems against avoidable degradation. And really, who could be against any of those? Wow. Okay, we have an announcement, and some of you may already know about this, but on Wednesday, March 12th at 12:30, there's a 2025 rally for healthcare at the State House. And this is pretty cool. The Alliance for a Healthy Kansas is going to offer transportation and also a box lunch. And they will have a pickup site at Wichita, Newton, Salina, Kansas City, and Lawrence. So if you're interested, please go to their website, Alliance for a Healthy Kansas, and that will be on their website, and you can register at the bus or to be picked up. I mean, you really can't get much better than that. Let's see, Susan, can you think of it? Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I do that every time. I'm Pam Martin, and I'm one of the co-leaders of the virtual chapter and also leader for the Barton County chapter. And I think, yes, I see a Barton County person. Hi, Deanne. Susan, would you like to introduce yourself? Oh, you're muted.
I'm Susan Weimer. I'm from Lawrence.
Oh, okay. Hi, Susan.
Sorry. I'm Susan Osborne, and I'm on the state executive committee. I would ask everybody to mute themselves if you could. And also, I know that we want questions, so put your question in the chat, and we will ask them. How does that sound? Thank you all for coming today.
Thanks, Susan. Okay, well, we're going to get to our speaker, and we're so excited to have him. He is a busy man, and we really appreciate the fact he's taking an hour out of his day to do this on a Sunday. Dr. Micah Kubic has served as the executive director of the Kansas ACLU since January 2022. He has 26 years of experience in civil rights and racial justice work. He leads the largest advocacy organization in Kansas, defending and strengthening the rights that belong to everyone under the Constitution. He previously served as the ACLU executive director for Kansas from 2015 to 2018, and he left us to go to Florida, wisely came back. He was down there for 3 years, 2019 to 2022. Prior to joining ACLU, he was director of planning, development, and evaluation at the Full Employment Council. That's the Kansas City Area Workforce Development Agency. Senior Program Officer at Greater Kansas City Local Initiative Support Corporation. And he's also an author. He's written Freedom Incorporated and Black Political Empowerment, and it was published by the University of Missouri Press in 2016. So without further ado, we're going to let Micah take it away.
Great. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here with you today. It's nice to see some familiar names and faces in the Zoom today, and also to see some new names and faces. So happy to be in community with all of you today, even on Spring Forward Day, which is one of my least favorite days of the year. That hour just messes me up for like a week afterwards. So happy to be here with you today. Always happy to do something with Women for Kansas. So I have to tell you, 10 years ago, 2015, about this time of year, it was March, I went to a restaurant in Old Town Wichita and had lunch with a woman named Lynn Steffen and lunch with a woman named Mary Connect, who I see on here today. We had never met each other, but we had the best time just getting acquainted then, and we have been friends ever since. And so there is nothing I would not do for Women for Kansas, and for those two women in particular, because they have just been my friends and have been so kind to me in every way since then, 10 years ago. So I was thinking a little bit about what I wanted to say to you today. And my father is from the Deep South, where storytelling is both an art and a pastime. And so anytime I am looking for some guidance about the world, when I'm looking for some direction, stories are where I often go. And so as I was thinking about this today, I was reminded of the very first story that I ever heard as a child. The very first story. It is not great literature. It is not sophisticated in any way, but I suspect that it is one that most of you have heard. So the very first story that I remember hearing as a child was the story of the Three Little Pigs. Y'all remember that? Y'all remember the Three Little Pigs? So what happened? Three little pigs decided that they each wanted to build a house. The first pig was maybe a little lazy, certainly complacent, and so decided to build a house made out of straw. Well, the big bad wolf was watching from afar. He found this very entertaining, and so he came along. He huffed and he puffed, he huffed and he puffed. He blew that house down, and he ate the first little pig up. Well, the second little pig learned just a little something from that, and so he built a house made out of sticks, out of wood. Well, the big bad wolf came along. He huffed and he puffed, he huffed and he puffed. He blew that house down, and he ate the second little pig up. Well, the third little pig was wiser than all the rest. The third little pig learned the lesson. The third little pig did the work to build a house made out of brick and mortar, to build a house made out of stone. He laid a strong foundation, such that when the big bad wolf came along, he huffed and he puffed, he huffed and he puffed, he huffed and he puffed, but he could not blow that house down. So, you know, when we are told these stories as children, yeah, they are supposed to entertain us, but we're also supposed to learn something from them. They are parables. We're supposed to learn a lesson from them. Well, what are the lessons we are supposed to learn from the story of the Three Little Pigs? We're supposed to learn about the value of preparation and hard work and strategy. We're supposed to learn not to be complacent. We're supposed to learn about the danger of being aware of those who would create chaos and havoc and destruction all around us. Now, I wonder what any of that could have to do with the world we are living in today. You already know. You already know. All of us know that for the next 4 years, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Chris Kubic, Their enablers in the state legislature, all of them, are going to spend their time huffing and puffing and huffing and puffing. There's going to be more huffing and puffing than you have ever heard in your life, more huffing and puffing than you could believe was possible. We already know they're going to spend the next 4 years huffing and puffing, trying to blow down our rights, trying to blow down the house of our Constitution, trying to blow down voting rights, trying to blow down reproductive freedom, trying to blow down immigrants' rights, trying to blow down the house of American democracy. We already know that's what they're going to spend 4 years doing, huffing and puffing to blow down everything that we cherish, all of our values. And so our job, the job of all of you here and everyone around this state and this nation, our job is to learn from the three little pigs and build a strong foundation, to build ourselves a house of brick and mortar, one that is strong enough to withstand all of that huffing and puffing. Our job is to do the work now, to have a strategy, to be thoughtful, to focus on the things that matter now, so that we can make sure that when that huffing and puffing happens, the house of our democracy does not blow down too. Now, a couple ways that we have to do that and that I want to talk to you about today. Now, a lot of this is certainly happening at the federal level, and I know everyone is concerned about the things that we see happening from the Trump administration. We are certainly concerned at the ACLU. You know, although I work at the ACLU of Kansas, we are a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization devoted to making sure that the rights of the Constitution are protected for everyone. And so we're concerned about things like President Trump's attempt to get rid of birthright citizenship. Y'all remember, this is one of the very first things he did when he resumed office on January 20th. That day, he signed an executive order to get rid of birthright citizenship. Now, that's not really the way that works, because you see, birthright citizenship is in the Constitution. The words are there. They are printed very clearly. It has been this way for nearly 150 years after the Civil War. But President Trump thought that he could sign an executive order, which is really just a memo, right? It's basically a memo like you get from Human Resources. It's a piece of paper. It's not even particularly fancy. He decided that a memo could overwhelm the Constitution. That's not the way that that works. You don't get to strip citizenship from millions of people, including children who have lived as American citizens their entire lives by signing a memo. And so we at the ACLU filed a lawsuit about that literally 59 minutes after the executive order was signed. We didn't even want to let a whole hour pass before we sued about that executive order. And so that executive order is now stayed. The court said you can't do that. There are a bunch of cases about it, but all of them have said that he is not allowed to do that. And so we're challenging birthright citizenship, his attempt to end it. So there's a lot going on at the federal level. But what I really want to stress to you is how important it is that we build a firewall for freedom, that we build this strong foundation here at the state and local level. For a couple reasons. First of all, because it is a place where we can do something. Sometimes the federal level seems abstract. All of the stuff in Washington seems so far away, whereas here we can actually do something, get something done. We also need to do it here because we need to make sure that we protect what we have at the state and local level, make ourselves as strong as possible so that when the Trump administration attempts to blow down these walls, we're able to resist them. If we build up our defenses here, it makes it harder for the Trump administration to try and push through its will all over this country. And we need to do things at the state and local level because those are things that actually help people in the short term. We want to make people's lives better. And so all of that means that if you are concerned about the Trump administration, the way to do something about it is to do work at the state and local level now. And by golly, let me tell you, our state legislature has given us plenty of things to worry about. We got plenty of things we need to do to protect ourselves, to protect our rights, to build that strong foundation, to build that brick and mortar right here in Kansas. And there's 3 of them I want to highlight for you today. There are three of them. I could pick a bunch more. Let me assure you, I could give you a long list, and I suspect some of these will come up in the question and answer period. But there are three in particular that I want to highlight for you as critical at this moment. The first is voting rights. Voting rights, voting rights. I know that the folks at Women for Kansas in particular know that voting rights have been a strong concern here in Kansas for many years. We have been on the front lines of the battle for voting rights for many years, especially since a fellow by the name of Chris Kubic became Secretary of State. And if we were all together in a room rather than on Zoom, that is the place at which you would boo and hiss when I say his name, Chris Kubic. Became the Secretary of. Thank you. Some of you got the clue, got the hint. When Chris Kubic became the Secretary of State, he imposed the most restrictive law on voter registration that had existed anywhere in this country since Alabama 1965. A lot of us worked together to defeat that in court, have it overturned, and we succeeded. But since then, our legislators have not given up on trying to find ways to restrict the right to vote. And it is no coincidence that every time they do so, they come up with things that make it harder for people of color, for African Americans in particular, people of color, young people, and older people to vote. There have been restrictions all over this country. For the last 3 years in a row, though, here in Kansas, we have defeated every last one of those restrictions that they tried to pass. Every new attack on voting rights for the last 3 years, we have turned down. We've managed to defeat in the state legislature. That does not mean, though, that our legislators have gotten the message. Instead, they keep on coming back again and again. And so this year, they are back once again trying to push through the same attack that they have unsuccessfully pushed the last couple of years to get rid of the 3-day mail processing window. I know, a more glamorous name for something you could never imagine in your life. It just rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? 3-day mail processing window. So what this is that in Kansas, lots of folks use mail-in ballots. Many of you have probably used mail-in ballots. Well, in Kansas, we say if you put your ballot in the mail before Election Day, before the end of day on Election Day, if it's postmarked, it has up to 3 days, 72 hours after the election to arrive at the election office. And we have that for the very simple reason that the mail is slow sometimes. Especially now, we all know the mail is moving a little slower than usual. I have a package that was supposed to arrive for Christmas, still hasn't gotten here. The mail is slow sometimes. This is especially true in parts of the state that are more rural, where the distances are longer. There are parts of the state where the mail literally leaves Kansas, goes to a different state to be processed, and then comes back again. And so, about 10 years ago, legislators decided to create this mail processing window just to give the mail a little time. And that's because the people who are voting have done everything right. They requested a ballot. They received it in time. They sat down at their kitchen table. They figured out who they were going to vote for. They filled in the bubbles. They put it in the envelope. They went and got a stamp, which is not a cheap expenditure nowadays. Put it in the mail on time. They did everything that we have asked them to in terms of civic engagement and voter participation. And so the law says that it then has 3 days to get there. Well, these folks in the state legislature, led by the chairman of the House Elections Committee, a guy from Leavenworth named Pat Proctor, have decided that they want to get rid of that 3-day mail processing window. And they say a lot of things about that. But the ultimate story here is that really just means that thousands of eligible Kansas citizens who did everything right will not be counted. Thousands of voters who did everything right will not have their voices heard for no reason at all. All it is a tool to make it harder for folks to vote, to discourage folks from using mail-in voting, and therefore to discourage even more people from voting. Because there are a lot of folks who find mail-in voting convenient, find it that it makes it easier for them to participate because they have busy lives. Well, if you make it harder for folks to do that mail-in voting, they're just going to not participate in the first place. So this is really about voter suppression. And there is no good reason to get rid of the 3-day mail processing window. None at all. In fact, the reason that the supporters of this move give you has to be one of the dumbest things I have ever heard in my life. I've been doing this a long time. I've heard some dumb things come out of politicians' mouths before. This one takes the cake. I'm a little bit embarrassed to even tell you what they say, but I'm going to do it anyways. So the reason that they provide for why we got to get rid of the 3-day mail processing window, and this came out of an elected official's mouth, was that if we were to count those ballots, the ones that come in that 3-day window, if we were to count those ballots, the vote totals would change. Well, that's how math works. Yes. In fact, when you count the ballots, the numbers do in fact change. That is not a good reason to disenfranchise thousands of Kansans, right? Math is not a good reason to disenfranchise thousands of Kansans. So we got to say no to this attempt to get rid of the mail processing window, both on its own terms, but also because it's just one more attempt to make it harder for people to vote. It's just one more thing that's going to get us down the road and prompt more attacks on voting rights that we want to say no to. If we want to defend our democracy, if we want to make sure that we build a strong foundation, that we have a house made out of brick and mortar when they come and huff and puff at voting rights, this is the place to do it. And now is the time to do it. Because this bill is moving through the legislature. The last couple of years, we defeated it. There were enough votes for it to pass in the legislature, but the governor vetoed it. And then they didn't have enough votes to override the veto. Well, it just passed the Kansas House of Representatives last week. And it had exactly 84 votes. It takes 84 votes to override a gubernatorial veto. There were a few members of the House who voted against it in prior years, but voted for it this time. So these are folks who aren't really convinced that this is a good idea. They thought it was a bad idea before. Now they're just sort of responding to some pressure that they're getting. And so our job collectively as folks who care about voting rights is to make sure that those individuals hear from folks in their communities that we care about this. This is not a partisan thing. It's not an ideological thing. There were a number of Republicans who voted against it before. There were Republicans who voted against it this time. And so what we got to do, assuming the governor vetoes it, and I don't speak for her, I'm not Laura Kelly, as you can probably discern. I'm not Laura Kelly, but she's vetoed it before. She is likely, I think, to veto it again. But our job is to flip just one member of the Kansas House, to persuade just one person, someone who voted against it multiple times in the past, to vote against it again this time. And we've got options for that. There's a guy named Tom Menix. There's a woman named Representative Pickert from Wichita. There's a representative named Samantha Potter Partial. There's about 6 of them who voted against it before. Those are the 3 that if you're in their district, you know people in their district, I would encourage you to reach out to them. Representative Menix, Representative Pickert, Representative Potter Partial. All folks who voted against this before, but voted for it for the first time this time. And we just got to flip one of them because there were already 4 Republicans who voted against this time. And if we do that, the governor's veto would survive, and this bill would go down in defeat yet again. We would defend voting rights yet again. We would put some really solid bricks in that wall that we need to build for the huffing and puffing. So that's the first one I want to mention to you, is voting rights. That bill is the 3-day mail processing window. The number is SB4. SB4. I never, ever remember the names of these bills, so I'm really quite proud of myself this afternoon for doing that. Thank you. SB4. The second one that I want to mention to you is around immigration. It's around immigration. I know lots of folks have different opinions about immigration. There are a bunch of bills moving through the state legislature now to get rid of in-state tuition for undocumented students, for example, something that we have had in Kansas for 20 years. Something where Kansas was really leading the nation, something we should be proud of, they're trying to get rid of. There's a bunch more. The thing I want to talk to you about is not in the state legislature, but is actually at the local level in the city of Leavenworth. The city of Leavenworth. And I don't know if we have anybody on here from Leavenworth today. This doesn't only apply to folks who live in Leavenworth, though, because what's happening is that they want to build or open a new immigration detention facility there, a prison for immigrants. And what happened was several years ago, there was a private prison operator named CoreCivic that operated a prison in Leavenworth. There are a couple prisons in Leavenworth. There's the federal one, there's a state one. This was operated by a private facility called CoreCivic on behalf of the federal government, separate from Fort Leavenworth, separate from everyone what knows there. This facility, CoreCivic, was so bad that the federal government ended the contract. It was so poorly operated, so horrific, that it is literally featured in textbooks and articles around the world on how not to operate a prison facility. The human rights abuses and danger at that facility were so bad that they shut it down, and it literally became the textbook example of what not to do. People were tortured in this facility. One man, for example, in a wheelchair, was left in a hot, scalding shower for 3 hours as punishment. Multiple detainees and staff people died. There were regular assaults and deaths in this facility because CoreCivic, the private for-profit company that operates it, doesn't prioritize safety. They don't prioritize the care of the folks who live there, right? They prioritize making a profit. That's what for-profit prisons do. And there are a number of them around the country. Most of them still operate. This one was so bad, they shut it down. And I cannot stress to you just how bad it has to be for the marshals and the Bureau of Prisons to say, that's too bad for us. That's what this one was. Well, they shut it down a few years ago, closed it. But CoreCivic, the for-profit company, they still got this big old property there, right? They still got this investment that they made in this hulking facility. And sure, there are tumbleweeds and the ceilings have fallen in, right? But they want to make a buck off of it. And so what they have decided to do was try to persuade first the Biden administration and now the Trump administration to let them reopen it as a prison for immigrants instead. There is no reason to believe that they have learned their lesson about operating a facility, no reason to believe that the horrific human rights abuses, which have been documented time and time again, have gotten better. Instead, there is only reason to believe that they're looking to make a quick buck. Now, I'm sure we all can suspect what the Trump administration's answer to this is going to be, right? I think we all can guess that the Trump administration is not only eager to open a facility, but the worse, the better, right? The more horrific the conditions, the more they probably like it. Well, the good news is they're not the ones who have the initial say. In fact, in order for this to move forward, the city of Leavenworth, the city commission, has to take a vote to give the facility a special use permit. A permit, right? That's the thing that will make the difference between whether immigrants are detained there and have their human rights violated and whether staff are endangered. Half the people who were endangered there before were staff. Half the people who got hurt and maimed and killed were staff. So the question of whether the facility is going to reopen and whether people are going to be endangered and whether it's going to be good for the community or not comes down to a permit. A permit. City planning and zoning. Who knew that it was so sexy and so powerful? City planning and zoning is what will make the difference in whether this facility can open or not. And so over the next month and a half, the city of Leavenworth is going to be having public meetings and hearing from the community about whether to grant this special use permit there or not. And if they say no, the facility doesn't reopen and this doesn't happen. Now, It doesn't matter whether you live in Leavenworth or not. If you do, that's even better, right? Even better, and they need to hear from you. But even if you don't live in Leavenworth, it's important that city leaders there hear from folks all over Kansas that this is not a facility that we want in our backyard. This is not a facility that we want endangering our friends and neighbors and community members right here in Kansas. It is not a facility that we want bringing these sorts of issues to our community. It does not matter what you feel about immigration. You may have a different opinion on immigration and comprehensive immigration reform than I do. That's okay. There are lots of folks in Leavenworth who have a different opinion about that and still believe that this facility is a danger to the community and a danger to the people who work there, a danger to the people who will be detained there. And make no mistake, folks in Leavenworth, they know how to live in a community with prison facilities, right? It's not that they have some, it's not that they're a bunch of prison abolitionists, right? It is, in fact, that this facility is so bad, so dangerous, so antithetical to our values that we should say no to it. And so I would ask you to be in touch with the folks at the City of Leavenworth. You can get more information about that and how to do it on our website at aclukansas.org, aclukansas.org, aclukansas.org. But reach out to the folks in Leavenworth. If you want to do something about immigration because you have qualms with President Trump's policy on this, the way to build that firewall for freedom, the way to build a strong foundation, the way to lay the bricks of a strong house is right there in the city of Leavenworth saying no to this for-profit human rights abuse factory. So that's the second one. The third one that I want to mention to you is the single most important thing you can do. If you are concerned about voting rights today, if you are concerned about reproductive freedom today, if you are concerned about LGBTQ plus equality today, if you are concerned about education funding today, if you are concerned about separation of church and state today, if you are concerned about health care access today, if you are concerned about the abstract values of justice and equality and fairness and constitutional rule today, if you are concerned about any of those things, much less all of them, the single most important thing we got to do today is protect the independence and impartiality of our Kansas Supreme Court. Because the folks who don't share our views on all of it, who are concerned about them in the sense that they want to undermine them and take them away, they are coming for the Kansas Supreme Court. They are upset that for years, the Kansas Supreme Court has resisted their partisan and political interventions. They are upset that they have not gotten their way. And so rather than trying to come up with better arguments, rather than trying to persuade the voters, they have decided it would be easier just to get rid of the Kansas Supreme Court. And they are led in this effort. They are led in this effort by Chris Kubic. That's the point where y'all are supposed to, do the thumbs down and boo hiss again, right? They are led by Chris Kubic, who has said, in public, he and Ty Masterson, the president of the Senate, will say, we want to change the selection of the Kansas Supreme Court because we believe in good government. We believe in efficiency. We believe in really making sure that the voters are heard. That's what they say in public. But when they go in private, or even when they go in public, but in spaces where they feel comfortable and they think no one is listening, they say that really they want to get rid of the Kansas Supreme Court because it voted to say that there is a right to bodily autonomy and a right to abortion access. They say that they want to get rid of it because it's defended voting rights. They say they want to get rid of it because it has funded our schools. Do not be deluded. Do not be convinced. Do not allow them to lie to you in saying that getting rid of the Kansas Supreme Court selection is about good government or about making voters heard. No, it's about Chris Kubic not being able to get the outcomes that he wants, not getting the extremist agenda he wants, and so trying to change the rules, stack the deck against the people of this state. In August of 22, y'all said 59% said we want to protect the ability to access abortion in this state. Chris Kubic doesn't care. Masterson doesn't care. He doesn't think you know what you're talking about. Instead, he wants to shut you down and create a new process that will give him new justices that will just play to his tune. That's what he wants. They tried to get rid of the judicial selection process, one that has existed for nearly 70 years, to create an impartial, independent judiciary in this state. And they want to get rid of it to bring in partisan direct elections instead. Not even by district, mind you. They want statewide partisan elections, which means that parts of this state that currently have 2 and even 3 justices sitting on the state Supreme Court bringing their perspectives to bear are going to be shut out entirely. They want direct partisan elections, the way they have in Wisconsin, where they spend $50 million on a state Supreme Court race, where out-of-state extremists and ideologues pour money into these races, such that big money is what wins, not the voters. That's what they want to do. Now, make no mistake about it. I believe in the independence and impartiality of the judiciary. I don't like all of the members of the Kansas Supreme Court. There's a couple I would not even look at if I passed them on the street. There's a number of decisions they've made that I think are terrible, that I think are bad law, that I think are not consistent with my values. But you know what? That's what happens when you're an adult. Sometimes there are outcomes that you don't like. And rather than saying, I'm going to pick up my toys, turn over the table, and try and create chaos for everyone, you say, well, we'll come back and try again. Chris Kubic, Ty Masterson, the rest of them, they want to create chaos, and they want to push through an extremist agenda any way they can. They don't care about the separation of powers. They don't care about judicial independence. They don't care about impartiality. They don't care about our shared values. What they want is what they want, when they want it, how they want it, every time they want it. And our job is to say, we believe in judicial independence. We believe in our court system. We believe in the values that they have upheld, even when we disagree with them. And we have to do that starting now, because even as we speak, the state legislature is moving to send you, the voters, a constitutional amendment that would get rid of our current impartial selection process and replace it with these direct partisan elections starting the very next time. It passed the Senate last week with a 2/3 majority, just barely. We just needed to flip one more senator and it would have failed to get the 2/3 majority. So now it goes to the House, where again, we got to make sure that every single House member in this state needs to hear from you. Doesn't matter where you are, take no vote for granted here. We got to be in touch with the members of the Kansas House to say we do not want this to move forward. It doesn't go to the governor at all because it's a constitutional amendment. So if the House passes it in probably this week, either this week or next is when they will consider it. If they pass it, then it will come to you, the voters, in August of 2026. So we have a 2-part job here, right? First of all, we got to try and stop it in the House. That's going to be a hard thing to do. I'm not going to lie to you. It's possible, but it's going to be really, really hard. The good news about that, though, is if it does pass out of the House, that's not the end of the story. That's when the real work begins of doing the work over the next 18 months to make sure that the voters reject this in August of 2026, the way they rejected a statewide ban on abortion in August of 2022. We got to get those same folks out to the polls. We got to remind folks that this is actually the same issue. It may sound tedious, it may sound procedural, it may sound different, but really, this is, again, a vote about whether we're going to have reproductive freedom in this state and all the other things we care about, but especially reproductive freedom, because Chris Kubic has said out loud over and over again, his number one reason for wanting this is to get rid of constitutional protections for reproductive health care. So let's be clear with our friends about that. Don't let them get distracted into thinking it's about something else. And we got to do that between now and August of 2026. We got work to do. We got to start now. We got to be talking to people about this now in order to make sure that we get the right outcome in August of 2026. That is why this is the single most important thing you can do right now. This one is the one that touches on every single issue you care about, whether it's one I named or another one. Every single issue that Women for Kansas cares about, everything that was in your mission statement before, every last one of them can find its way to the Kansas Supreme Court. And so protecting its independence and impartiality is the most important thing we can do now. They are huffing and puffing like crazy at this court. Our job is to build up those walls, to build the firewall for freedom, to build a house made out of brick. So those are the three things I wanted to talk to you about today: voting rights, immigration, the impartiality of our courts. In every respect, we have work to do here at the local level because that is the way that we both protect our rights, protect our neighbors and friends, and respond to the nonsense that we see coming from Donald Trump and his friends in Washington. They are the same fight. These are not different fights. They are all the same fight. They are all linked together. If you care about what you see in there, you got to do something here. If you care about what's happening here, it's going to impact there. Because we know that they are huffing and puffing and huffing and puffing and huffing and puffing. But now, my friends, is not the time. Now is not the time to live in a straw hut of complacency. Now is not the time to live in a house of sticks, to putter around in a house of sticks saying, oh, maybe we can just make a deal with the big bad wolf. Maybe we can compromise with him. No, that little pig got ate up too. No, now is the time to live and build in a house of brick, to lay the foundations, to make the walls of this house so tall and thick and strong and impervious, so that when Donald Trump, Chris Kobach, and all the rest of them huff and puff and huff and puff, the house of our democracy does not blow down.
Okay,
Wow.
that was great.
Yeah. I have a comment.
We've got some questions. If I can join in and ask, we have a question. What is our current election process for Supreme Court justices, and so that we can understand that when we're writing our letters?
It's a great question. So the current process is a very impartial one that is designed to have folks who are familiar with the system weigh in, but also to protect against corruption at every chance, right? So we have this system because 70 years ago, there was a huge corruption scandal called the triple play, where the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the chief justice of the Supreme Court conspired with one another to appoint each other to various jobs and circle it around. So now we have a system called the nominating commission, where about half of the members are elected by members of the Kansas Bar Association. Half of them are appointed by whoever is the governor at that moment. And then the nominating commission assesses applications for the Kansas Supreme Court. And they do so at public hearings, ones that are open to the public, where the minutes are published out in the sunlight. They come up with 3 names. So out of all the applications, they pick the 3 that they think are most qualified, most capable, have the best judicial temperament, send those to the governor, and then the governor picks one of those 3 names. So it's both transparent and lots of sunlight, but also lots of steps built in for independence and impartiality along the way. Very different from this scenario where big money would drive everything.
Okay, and if I understand it, that bill is SCR 1611.
Yeah, 1611.
Okay.
SCR 1611.
Thanks to Mandy Charles for that. We also have a question. Apparently, Canada has started a petition to revoke Musk's citizenship. How can we start that process here?
We do not have a similar process here in the United States. In Canada, they actually have a thing built in with their House of Commons, where if enough people sign a petition, the House of Commons is obligated to at least look at it. They don't necessarily have to do anything about it, but they at least have to look at it. We don't have any similar thing with our Congress here. As we all know, sometimes it doesn't matter how many people speak up. Roger Marshall thinks they're all from Canada and brought in on chartered buses anyways. So we don't have a similar mechanism. What we do have is a mechanism to hold Elon Musk and his Doge accountable. We have processes to hold them accountable and stop them from continuing to run amok. And so we have to make use of those processes in the courts and by demanding accountability from our members of Congress too.
Okay. And again, if you want to ask a question, please put it in chat. We've got still have some good ones, but what do you think will happen with all these executive orders that Trump is signing? It's almost as if they become law immediately. And what's the process for declaring them invalid?
Yeah, so the executive orders, there's goo gobs of them, right? I mean, there's some all the time. So they are supposed to guide the way the executive branch does its work, right? Executive orders are not supposed to change the law, right? They're not supposed to overrun laws that have been passed by Congress. And so there are different types of executive orders he's issued, right? I think there are some that are problematic because they really effectively try to change the law. And then there are some that he's probably within his rights to issue for the administrative side, for the executive branch, but where there are impacts that are challengeable. Regardless, they usually do go into effect, at least for the executive branch, immediately upon issuance. And that's why we are challenging them at the ACLU as often as we can. We and others are challenging them at every opportunity, and then through the court process, which does not always move as speedily as we would like. But a bunch of these are moving relatively quickly. I mean, it can be the case that these court cases take years. There are a bunch of them where we are getting, and where other folks who are suing are getting injunctions that stop the administration from enforcing that. We're getting those relatively early in the process here. I think that will continue. And we have to see it through, and we got to continue to challenge them where we can. And then I know lots of folks are concerned about, well, what happens if they don't follow the court orders, et cetera, et cetera. So far, they largely are, right? I mean, I think we don't want to catastrophize, and we don't want to play the what if game until we have to. So we should recognize the fact that they are largely complying with the order, right? They try and find loopholes that they can get through, or they comply and then go on TV and lie, as they do about everything. But they are complying with court orders today.
Okay. How do we get the dark money out of our elections?
I don't know that there is a way, honestly, to get dark money out of our elections. I think what we can do instead is educate ourselves, prepare ourselves to know what the dark money is doing and why it is doing it, and be prepared to fight back against it. I think trying to wipe it out of our system is probably beyond our capability at the moment. And so instead, we just got to equip ourselves with the tools we need to educate ourselves and others about its influence, about its role. And usually when people see that, when they know what it is, they don't like it, they react negatively to it. Even if it is articulating perspectives that they like. Nobody likes the lack of transparency. Nobody likes being made to feel like they are a tool in somebody else's game.
And the final one I have, unless somebody puts one in chat, how do we get rid of Chris Kubic, even if it's just out of Kansas?
I mean, I keep on signing him up for mailing lists to take travel out of the country, but he just never goes. So He is up for re-election in 2026. He is currently the Attorney General. His term ends in 2026, so he will either run for re-election or run for something else. Regardless, it is up to the voters to decide whether they want to support his agenda or not. I would note that usually when folks are reminded of what he has done, they don't like it. They don't like it. He is unpopular even among folks who share many of his views. He is unpopular because he is not very good at what he does. He loses in court a lot. He puts forward bad arguments. He does damage to their cause as well. And so it is our job to remind everyone between now and the election of the full catalog of what he has not accomplished, either as Attorney General or as Secretary of State. And then it's up to the voters to decide. I thought maybe he would get a job in the Trump administration, but apparently even they don't want him.
We do have a question that just came in. You gave the names of 3 representatives that voted previously for voting rights, but most recently changed their vote. I think this woman got the first 2, Minnis and Pickers. The third was a hyphenated name. What was it?
So it's Minnix, Minnix is the first one. Pickert, Pickert is the second one. And then Samantha Potter, Poetter, Herschel, Parshall. Minnix, Pickert, Potter, Herschel.
Okay.
And again,
Right.
all 3 have been good on this issue before. So it's not even necessarily persuading them that it's the right thing to do. It's letting them know that folks in their community think this is really important.
And you said Pickard is from Wichita. Where are the others from?
From rural Kansas.
Rural Kansas. Okay.
Phoenix, I believe, is from the far west, and Samantha Potter Partial, I believe, is from north central, but I would have to check to be sure.
Okay, well, you've got me motivated with an absolutely fantastic speech.
Yeah.
So, I mean, seriously. So Pam, Martin, do you want to take over and make any last comments, or do you have a question?
Just that was an amazingly inspiring presentation. Thank you, Micah. And I don't know if you want to just quickly, one of the things that my husband and I have really noticed is this attack on local control. You know, things like banning cities from banning plastic bags, which I don't know if is up this year. But, and then this last one that is just, I think, horrendous, where they want to tell schools, all schools, from preschool through universities, that a child's pronoun has to match their birth certificate, and they have to get permission from the parent, is how I understand it. Is there anything else you'd want to speak to on that?
I would just say on that pronoun bill, which is really horrible.
Yeah.
We should note that they already banned gender affirming care in Kansas earlier this year after having well, we defeated it the last couple of years. This time around, they got rid of gender affirming care. So folks are not able to get the health care that they need. And we should also be clear, this isn't just like surgeries, the most pronounced version. This is also like being able to have talk therapy and talk to someone about how you are feeling, how you're experiencing the world, about your gender, right? That's a really terrible bill. But the pronoun bill that you're mentioning also says that in order to call someone by a nickname, you have to have written permission from their parents. Because otherwise it might be a gender, what they perceive to be a gender inappropriate nickname. And also gives school staff permission, even if the parents want you to call the person by those pronouns or by that name, if the staff member has what they consider a religious objection to doing so, it gives them permission to use the name that the parents don't want you to use. Gives you permission to use the pronouns that the parents have said otherwise. So we believe in parental rights right up until we disagree, and then we give ourselves the power to really engage in harassment and bullying of children, right? That's what that is. When you're giving the teacher or a staff member the right to use a name and pronouns that both the student and the parents have asked you not to, but we're going to give you legal permission to do so and say that you're in the right. That tells you this is not about parental rights. It's not about anything other than being cruel to those who they don't favor, right? Members of small groups, especially, who they don't favor.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And you've sent us forward with suggestions, and actually you've sent us forward with a list of to-dos. I
That's some
think
homework. That's what you got. You got homework.
We've got
Everybody's got
homework, yeah.
homework.
But we're up to it, aren't we, Susan?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
we're
I
up
think
to it.
all these strong people on this um, event are excited. Everybody, a thumbs up for Micah.
Yeah.
Yes, see?
And this will be it's recorded. Someone was asking about that. And
Yes.
so you will get a link of the recording. So we'll spread this further, Micah.
Thank you very much. Lots of people are putting thank you
Yes.
in the chat. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for all your work, Micah. Keep it up. Maybe someday